Hey, it's Mike here, and today I want to respond to Samantha Bee's recent video titled Thicc Not Sick. Yes, this is jumping into the tumultuous territory of fat shaming and fat acceptance, and I'm going to try and be respectful and hopefully not ruin my career as somebody that says stuff into a camera.
Nowhere is size discrimination more alarming than in the medical industry. This is a segment we are calling Thicc Not Sick.
Now, to her credit, Samantha had some great points that I do want to echo in this video, but she also had some other points that were kind of objectively incorrect or a misleading representation of the science or just a representation of how she might have not had all of the information. Now, I want to mention that my goal here is to take a level-headed sort of public health view of this issue here. I'm not super far on any one side of this issue. I know it's easy to just say you're in the center, but that is the case. All right, let's look at the first point that I think she made that was really good that I want to pass on here, and that is that physicians tend to negatively stereotype obese people. From this study, quote, "There is a growing body of evidence that physicians and other healthcare professionals hold strong negative opinions about people with obesity," and they cited 8 studies behind that one claim. And as a result of that, obese people can be misdiagnosed or not tested at all for certain things. She highlighted the case of a woman who was misdiagnosed with obesity pain when in reality she had scoliosis, which is an abnormal curvature of the spine.
He diagnosed her with something called obesity pain without ever examining her. She later learned she had scoliosis, a condition not caused by obesity.
But I need to be completely neutral here and add the point that, at least according to this study, the severity of scoliosis is certainly influenced by obesity. And another point which she didn't specifically say, but she alluded to and I want to build on, is that a doctor telling a patient that they're fat, especially in the wrong way, can just lead to a lot of emotional issues, and on top of that, very likely not solve the problem. Hey Brenda, welcome. This is my doctoral degree, and with it I'm gonna tell you you're fat. And come back next month so I can tell you you're fat again. Now, at this point, it goes without saying that fat shaming has been extremely detrimental to a ton of people, not just women, but also men. So it makes sense that we should put a strong effort into reversing that if possible and preventing it in the future. But if we're really concerned about people's overall emotional health and physical health and how long they live, then we have to make sure that fat acceptance doesn't lead us to blind ourselves from facts and lead to misusing information in damaging ways. And this brings me to where I had a little bit of issue with some of the points she made, and the first one of those, probably the most important one, was this one.
Diets don't work, assholes! There are many studies that show diets don't work.
Now, giving her the benefit of the doubt, this definitely had some major language limitations. The issue here is that yo-yo dieting is not the same as making changes to your diet, making dietary lifestyle changes. Well, weight loss challenges, cleanses, and other short-term diets generally don't achieve any type of meaningful body composition change. There is a diet that has been shown to be effective long-term, and maybe since this is a newer study, Samantha hasn't heard about it, she doesn't know about it, but this study, the Broad study, which I've mentioned too many times, put people on a whole food plant-based diet. They did not have them do added exercise, and they let them eat as much as they want, and according to the researchers, it was the most effective weight loss at 6 and 12 months with this type of dietary intervention that they had ever seen. This is a weight loss that is pretty comparable to getting bariatric surgery. So you just can't have your head on straight and look at this study and say diets don't work. So yeah, well, there are a lot of diets that do not work. That is absolutely the case. That doesn't mean that no diets work, especially no lifestyle dietary changes work. Okay, her next point.
UCLA researchers found that the majority of people who lose weight on a diet regain it all within 5 years.
Yes, yo-yo diets generally don't work because they aren't a permanent change. It's like a Canadian person trying to solve Canada's cold weather problem by going to Mexico for like a week. It's not gonna do anything. You know, even if you lose 40 pounds, you're gonna go right back to your old diet, your old habits, and just gain that weight back. But looking to populations of Western vegans, they average a normal BMI. They're the only dietary group to do that. And this is long-term. This is people that do that diet. They're not just all about to gain 60 pounds back or something. She then goes as far as to sort of fear you out of changing your diet. Yes, she is more specific with the language here saying yo-yo diet, but she's still doing it under the topic of how you shouldn't bother changing your diet.
Yo-yo dieting may be even harder on your body than just being fat. It's been linked to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes.
We have to ask, what's the most common type of diet that people do in the US? It tends to be a low-carb, Atkins-type, high-meat, high-saturated fat diet. And so it's no wonder that from studies like this, low-carb diets are shown to increase all-cause mortality. Not a good thing. But I have to add, unless that was actually a low-carb vegan diet, in that case, it was associated with a lower mortality rate. Heck, in this study, people went on a higher meat, low-carb diet, and the result was that their artery clogging accelerated. It increased. But again, is it all diets? What diet is associated with way lower diabetes? In the case of this study, 78% lower rates. Is associated with lower cancer, has been shown clinically to prevent heart attack and stroke, to open up arteries. It's a vegan diet. Who would have thought that I would have said that? All right, moving on to her next point.
And some researchers have concluded most dieters would have been better off if they hadn't gone on a diet at all.
But in the case of those people with those way lower disease rates, etc., on a vegan diet, they were better off. Again, we have that ambiguity of language, but I really would have liked it if she just didn't entirely ignore the idea of making dietary lifestyle changes long term. Now, there's one area that I think we need to tread lightly on, and she never specifically said it, but I really got the drift that she was saying that doctors shouldn't even talk to their patients about weight if they're obese. Maybe I'm stretching what she's saying.
Even when doctors try to treat obese patients as people, insurance companies may require them to bring up their patient's weight or risk being denied reimbursement. That is awful.
This and other statements throughout her video led me to believe that she's saying that doctors should just be weight blind. You know, to conclude that is sort of acting like you have answers that we don't have yet. You know, we have to look at a couple massive groups of people, have one where their doctors talk about weight and one where their doctors don't talk about weight, and see what the health outcomes of them are. But we don't have that, and along those lines, this could kind of push bad practice a little bit. It kind of goes against the Hippocratic Oath. Quote, "I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure." I mean, imagine if a doctor just decided not to tell their patient that they had melanoma, which is skin cancer, because skin issues are connected to self-esteem. That would be completely unacceptable, and now I think we need to get in the topic of how dangerous it actually is to be obese, realistically looking at the research. The unfortunate reality is that obese people are much more likely to get sick, and well, in many cases that can just be association. There are cases where it's caused by obesity itself, and we'll get into some of those in a second. Now, depending on who's making the estimate, the level of obesity, and one's sex, we can be looking at 6 or 8 or even 14 years off somebody's life, and maybe more importantly, up to 20 healthy years taken off somebody's life. In other words, being sick for 20 more years than you otherwise would have been. Over the period of this study, for example, those who were obese had 27% increased death rates, and those who were very obese had twice the death rate. And for what it's worth, we have some preliminary data from a study showing that obesity kills possibly 1.5 times as many people as smoking does, which is huge. And I'll say smokers often have self-esteem issues that can drive their smoking, and so telling them that they're killing themselves and that they're smoking is possibly going to hurt their self-esteem, but they're still going to be better off and have a lower chance of dying if you tell them to not smoke as a doctor. I feel like you don't really stop medical practice just because of a potential worst case scenario. I mean, it's not like we never do surgery because it could go wrong. We just try and find safer ways to do surgery. And to the credit of doctors, Samantha never did mention any of the successful times that people talk to their obese patients, they work with them, they change their habits, and all the cases where that did prevent diseases such as cancer and heart disease and stroke and diabetes and so on. In other words, if you are actually able to reverse obesity, you can add several years to somebody's life, and ignoring that is just not good medicine. So I would have to update her title with maybe a better version, which would be "Thickness is an increased chance of sickness, but let's not be dicks about it." Now let's go to another point that was in general a very good point, but I had a little bit of issues with it. Here it is, and then I'll explain.
Bad treatment discourages patients from seeking care. Obese women are more likely to delay mammograms and pap smears, which is partially responsible for the fact that they're more likely to die from breast and cervical cancers.
Yes, if doctors are bad at interfacing with obese patients, we're definitely going to have problems like this. And to quote the study she mentioned, quote, "Unfortunately, obese patients often feel unwelcome in medical settings where they encounter negative attitudes, discriminatory behavior, and a challenging physical environment." Now for the part that I want to question, and that is along the whole theme of Thicc is Not Sick, and that is that you sort of made it seem like obese patients don't really have an increased risk of cancer. It's just a bad health relationship. Yes, she did say partly, to be fair, but the other part of it is from the CDC, quote, 55% of all cancers diagnosed in women and 24% of those diagnosed in men are associated with overweight and obesity. Yes, that is just talking about an association, and some of those might just be completely unconnected, but there are situations where having excess fat in the body, that fat actually contributes and possibly causes cancer. In particular, visceral fat, fat stored directly around your organs, can lead to oxidative stress, which sort of rips apart your DNA and can lead to mutations. From this study, visceral fat especially creates 2 to 3 times more of a certain inflammatory molecule than other tissues, which of course can lead to damage. Partly why the researchers mention that, quote, chronic inflammation is more pronounced in visceral than in subcutaneous fat compartments and explains a major incidence of neoplasia or tumors in obese patients. And that's just one mechanism. Higher fat in the body can lead to insulin resistance, which can end up spiking the blood and feeding cancer as well. And we have how fat is estrogenic and that excess estrogen can feed female cancers, for example. And I hate to be focusing on the negative here, but these are basic facts that are being left out of the conversation. Now, there's just one point I want to add here that she did not mention, but I see in this conversation a lot, and that is genetics. A lot of people say, oh, I have bad genetics, therefore I'll always be fat, and there's nothing I can do about that. But the reality is, from studies like this, it appears that people with the fat genes only have an extra 2 to 7 pounds on their body. This is why the obesity researchers went as far as to say a focus on individual genetic traits is a mere distraction. So my point with all of this is that I want to combat the message that there is nothing you can do. You are destined to be overweight. Changing your diet won't do anything. Don't even bother exercising because you don't have the determination. While fat shaming is absolutely ethically wrong, that assumption back there is completely factually wrong. No, in fact, there is hope. You can make some lifestyle changes that have clinically demonstrated benefits. And final point to Samantha's benefit, she is talking about a medical world where, yeah, most doctors don't have the tools to fight obesity. So when they bring it up, it's probably going to have way more of a detrimental effect than it would if they actually had a solution. We need to restructure our system so that these people with obesity are given the option, if they want it, to be referred to lifestyle overhaul programs that have a lot of community involvement and mentorship by people who have overcome obesity. So the problem is that doctors just aren't trained in behavior change, which is exactly what we need to do to fight obesity. Now, she did say another good thing here.
I'm not suggesting doctors shouldn't talk to overweight patients about healthy eating and exercise. I'm saying they should talk to all patients about it with empathy and with a focus on self-acceptance. You will actually be saving lives.
So she does agree that doctors should talk to patients about healthy eating, but again, she's saying that they should be weight blind. Now, zooming way out here, we have these issues in the doctor's office and so forth, but a lot of them stem from us putting so much value on how people look when we really shouldn't be doing that. So after making a whole video about how we should put less pressure on people to look a certain way, she goes and puts 2 super cut dudes who look very much a certain way in at the end. A little bit of a mixed message. So in the end, while I really value most of the main points, the main messages in Samantha's video, that, you know, obese people are being mistreated in this context, I definitely think in certain cases she went a little too far, to the point where she was sort of slashing hope for people to improve their lives and get healthier. You know, she painted a picture that diet changes won't do anything and that somebody who is obese is just as healthy as somebody who's at a normal BMI, which is sadly factually incorrect. I wish that wasn't the case. But again, we do have a diet that's clinically shown to do a great job at reducing weight, and the side effects are opening up arteries, reversing diabetes, and lowering your risk of other diseases as well. And I did recently make a video on the science of vegan fat loss if you're interested more in the mechanisms of that, and I'll link that right up here in a second. But definitely let me know down below what you thought about all of this, and please try to not shame anybody. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.